Okay, once again, a warm welcome and good morning to all the participants. I think we can get started. I know we do still have people joining in, but I think obviously due to time, what we'd like to do is we'd obviously like to get these sessions underway. Before we get started this morning, my name is Riza Amra. I'm one of the directors at Turning Point Chartered Accountants. I've been working in the nonprofit sector now for just over 10 years. I see we've got some clients who we've actually been working with for a number of years on the session today as well. But before we get started, in terms of the official introduction and welcome, I think we'd obviously like to hand over to Dr. Baker, who is the chairman of Iqraa Trust South Africa. Iqraa Trust is the primary sponsor of these events. They've partnered with us for a number of years on capacity building initiatives, in the nonprofit sector, with their motto being helping people help themselves. I'm not sure if Dr. Baker is online currently,
yes,
but I'd like to Dr. Baker, you are. Okay, I'd like to hand over to you to do the official welcome and opening.
Thank you very much indeed, Reza. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to meet with all of you virtually. We hope next time it will be in person, maybe in our center here. But I'm sure many of you maybe have never heard about Iqraa Trust, the sponsor of this program. Iqraa Trust, very quickly, is a non-profit organization. We focus mainly on education, training, skills development, healthcare. Our website is www. Iqraa is IQRAA. You can see the name, I think, on the screen. So it's iqraatrust.org. Over the years, we supported many organizations. Maybe we reached the figure of 1,260. So we offer donations and the grants to various organizations. They apply and we do the due diligence, we check their credentials, and then we offer them a donation or a grant. So we are active throughout South Africa. So the main activity again is to support the various organizations. The second main activity, we support also university students. We offer interest-free loans and the bursaries. And we supported thousands of students. We work with all universities in the country. The third main activity is we have our own projects. And this is one of them. This is a very good initiative. We started it with TPC, the Turning Point consultants. And we used to offer it in person in all major cities. So Amra and his team, and we offered it in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, Durban, all major cities in South Africa. And unfortunately, this time, because of the COVID, we decided to offer it virtually. So I hope it will be as effective as the one in person, but we are planning shortly, maybe in the beginning of the new year, to start to offer it again in person. So when I talked about projects, we we believe in partnerships, and we work with all universities. We offer excellent projects. And one of them, we have in front of us, our offices in Durban, a new center inside Hunt Road Secondary School in Berea. And this center, it's a beautiful building. We offer training to various organizations on governance, on fundraising. And we also offer programs to teachers, to learners, and to parents with the objective to enhance education in South Africa. I would advise you, if anyone wants to know more about the Iqraa Trust Knowledge Center, to contact Candice at our office. She will attend this program. She's sitting in front of me now with Khadija and with Cindy from our office. So 3 of my staff are attending this program. So our telephone number, for those of you who are interested to know what other training program we offer, it's 031-201-2911. About this program, I'm sure Reza and his team will offer you excellent content, and I'm sure you will benefit a lot from it. But I'm an economist by profession. As you know, we have so many challenges in South Africa. And if you look carefully, you will see that behind all these challenges like poverty, like corruption, like mismanagement, and behind all of this, of course, the lack of economic growth, the unemployment, so many things. I'm not going to talk about them now, but behind all of this is poor governance and lack of accountability. So this is at the macro level, but also at the micro level, the level of organizations. If we have organization led by low-skilled officials or staff members, and also they have a problem with the governance, again, they will have the same problem. The organization will not be performing that well. So that's why we are offering this program, which focus on many issues related to governance at the level of organizations. So I'm sure that you will benefit a lot, and I hope you will communicate with the facilitators. I will be available for a while on the program to answer any questions. But Reza and his team, actually, they are doing a fantastic job. And I know that you will benefit a lot from this program. I wanted to finish my introduction by encouraging all of you to take notes of what's being taught to you. And also, please let us know. We need to know, to listen, to get your opinion about the program with the objective to enhance it. So if you have any specific suggestions on how to improve our performance in this program, we'll be very, very happy to get feedback from you. Again, welcome to all of you. We're very, very happy to have all of you in this program. And we like to be always in touch with you. And I wish you a lovely day. Thank you very much. Over to you, Reza.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baker. Thank you very much. As Dr. Baker has mentioned, we would have obviously loved to have been doing these sessions in person like we've done for a number of years. It's a bit difficult for someone like myself to be in one fixed position because generally I've got the habit whenever I speak, I walk around quite a bit. Even if I'm on my mobile phone, you'll find me pacing up and down. That's just out of habit. So it is a bit difficult to be standing, obviously, behind a computer screen and obviously trying to engage with you. But nevertheless, I think what we will do is we'll obviously try to make the most of the situation that we all find ourselves in. I know there has been an overload of Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams meetings, but let's hope that this one is a little different. We'd like to make it as interactive as possible. So as much as obviously we will disseminate information throughout the series, but I think with all the speakers that we've got lined up, we're quite happy to field questions as we go along. As opposed to where it's just one way, we're just speaking and there's no questions coming forth. You're most welcome to ask questions at any time as opposed to only leaving it towards the end. We will obviously allocate some time towards the end for specific question and answer, for a specific question and answer session. But yeah, I'm quite happy to field questions as we go along. What I will do is periodically, I would just pause and open the floor up. You guys are welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question in person or even put it up in the chat as well if you prefer. For those of you who prefer having your videos on, I think that will be helpful to me as well. It wouldn't feel as though I'm speaking to myself. You're most welcome to keep it on. I know some of you would probably be impacted by load shedding, so do keep in touch with us. I should be fine from my side in terms of presenting, but you never know sometimes with unscheduled power cuts. If for whatever reason we do lose connection, please can I ask that you perhaps rejoin with the link that was shared for today's session, and we'll just continue where we obviously left off at that specific point. So yeah, for those of you that don't know, I'm just going to reintroduce myself because some would have obviously come in just after the initial introduction. My name is Reza Amra. I'm one of the directors at Turning Point Chartered Accountants. I have been working personally in the nonprofit sector now for just over 10 years. As Dr. Baker mentioned, we've been rolling out workshops and capacity building programs for nonprofit organizations across the country for a number of years. Iqraa Trust has been a great partner, and Dr. Baker has actually been pushing for us to actually even host these sessions this year, because I think the last one we probably hosted was back in towards the latter part of 2019. And what we find is that most nonprofit organizations, unfortunately, it's such a huge sector, but what we find sometimes is that there's insufficient support, available to the sector in terms of financial expertise, in terms of making sure that organizations have full access to tax benefits, and that sort of thing. What we find is quite prevalent is that you'll find that there's many accounting or audit firms out there, with all due respect, would obviously focus on the public and the private sectors, but for whatever reason, the nonprofit sector is obviously looked at as the third sector, and you sort of do a bit of work by the way, a bit of pro bono work here and there, and that sort of thing as well. And for us, it's always been about empowering you, and that's why we've obviously called the series Empower, obviously a play on the word empower, where we feel that nonprofit organizations need to be empowered by this information. Unfortunately, it can be quite a minefield, to get your heads around the different benefits available to nonprofit organizations from a tax perspective, the compliance rules and regulations and that sort of thing as well. So many organizations struggle. And what we've always been focusing on is to try and disseminate and get out as much information as possible. And through these events that we've hosted over a number of years, I think we have been able to do so. We've reached parts of the country that we never even knew existed, over the years. And what we hope is that through this series, that except for just coming in, I mean, we all go for, workshops and seminars, and we get slides and we take it and we leave it in our drawers. And when we're doing a spring clean, then we actually come across it and we look at it again or browse through it. But what we'd like for you guys to do here, after each of these sessions, is that as introspect, look at it within your organization's context, and see what you could implement within your organization. So even if it's some of the technology solutions that we would recommend and suggest, let alone the compliance and the tax benefits, that's obviously a given. You have to do that. But just introspect and look at it and see where you could possibly benefit, and what could you implement within your organization. So it's all about making change. I think that's what the series is about. It's about obviously ensuring that we can actually make change. Let's see how we can improve. Let's see how we can empower those within our organization. And at the end of the day, obviously serve the causes, that we do. Just with regard to today's topic, if someone said to me many years ago that I'm going to be one day presenting on cloud accounting and tech, I'd probably have to think twice about it. And I'm just going to take you back, many years, perhaps if I'm looking at it, maybe mid to the late 80s, without giving my age away. I grew up, and my mom at that time used to actually sell computers. In those days, having a PC at home wasn't a norm, let alone a laptop or a tablet. Computer salesmen will actually go out and sell to corporates or to companies, and she used to actually sell, to medical professionals. So obviously, having or being in that sort of industry, we were fortunate enough to have a PC at home, and it's nothing like the ones that you'd have today. It obviously had those big screens, let alone the towers. It used to actually sit on what do you call it, the CPU as such, and there was no color on the screen. It used to, I remember even starting up, it would actually take a good few minutes, and you could actually hear the processing happening in the background as well. So obviously, having that access at home, I'd play around with it and that sort of thing. But she changed jobs, and with that, obviously, the computer technology had changed, and there was quite a bit of a gap between me actually working on it in the 80s and the next time that I actually worked on a computer. The reason being is I went to a public school. Unfortunately, in those days, our schools never had computer labs, or we never even offered, I think, computers to junior primary. I mean, today, I think it's a norm. And then going into high school, I mean, I never chose the subject, so I was never exposed to it. And we're talking about probably 10 years later. And the next time I actually worked on a computer was in the LAN at university. And that too, it wouldn't really be to actually work on it. It would be more to set up. I don't know how many of you know about football and fantasy football and fantasy soccer and that sort of thing. So I'd be setting up my teams in the LAN. That's the only thing I'd generally do with it, until the process changed with regard to articles. Previously we would fill out an application form. You'd get the big firms that would come out to university and they'd have an open day and they'll cascade, and you just go out and complete the application form at their desks. That process had obviously changed. They were now moving it online. So I was forced to actually sit in the LAN and complete an application form. So it was obviously quite new to me. Now I'm working with software that I actually never seen in my life. Even in terms of simple typing into text boxes and things like that was quite a challenge. But fortunately, I had friends who'd always like sort of help me along. But this time around, it was obviously taking me much longer to actually do the application itself or even access it. And unfortunately, there was a fashion show happening at university at that time, and they thought it would be, my mates thought it would be much more fun actually watching a fashion show than trying to actually sit and support me in completing an application form. So I was left all alone at a computer trying to complete an application form. And you'll never believe, but I had no clue how to actually type into the next text box after I've completed the first field. I had no idea that you could merely just scroll using the mouse or the cursor, and you click and you'd able to, or even hit your tab button and you'd be able to go into the next text box. And being a second year university student with no airtime, those were before the days of WhatsApp calls and that sort of thing. So I actually sent an SMS to a mate to ask him how do I go about actually typing onto the next text box, and that should have actually been framed. So yeah, so that's my story in terms of obviously my technology journey. But what it does show is that there's hope. There's hope. I know not everybody is quite comfortable with tech and embracing change and using new tools that are available, whether it's cloud accounting and that sort of thing. But believe me, I'm proof that change can happen. Over the past few years, I've become quite passionate about embracing technology within our firm, within our practice, and with the organizations that we work with. And I think partly that comes down to me having 4 kids. So obviously time is always of the essence, between running a practice and obviously getting your kids to extracurricular activities and that sort of thing, especially when all of them are obviously below 12, so you're juggling a lot. And I think because of that, you sort of try to do things more efficiently, to make more valuable use of your time as well, and to actually automate mundane tasks and add value to our clients at the end of the day. I think that's what the objective is, and that's where the passion sort of comes from in terms of trying to embrace the new technology and the tools that are available to us. So hopefully with with just a bit of introduction, you guys, and those of you out there who are sort of obviously going into uncharted territory when it comes to technology, you can see that change is possible. It just takes a bit of a positive mindset, and believe me, once you step into this journey, there really is no turning back. You definitely see benefit in embracing technology within your organizations as well. So yeah, just in terms of what we'd like to cover, obviously for today, just an overview of the main topics for discussion in terms of today's sessions, cloud accounting and technology for nonprofit organizations. But obviously, for those of you that don't know us, just a little bit about our firm. And then what we'd like to do is go into the cloud itself. Why the cloud? Why all the noise about cloud technology? The benefits, and what it can it bring to you as an organization and to you as an individual as well. Then what we will do is we'd like to obviously look at a snapshot of the tech tools that are available. Obviously, because of time, we're not going to be able to discuss each and every one of them. And there's probably a lot more out there. So just bear in mind that today's session is just to obviously make you aware of what's out there. You're not going to become an expert overnight. It is a journey. It's a journey that we as a firm are on as well at the same time. So once you obviously make the decisions in terms of obviously going down this route in terms of utilizing cloud technology within your organization, that change is not going to happen overnight. You have to have a plan in place in terms of which tools do you need to focus on and prioritize initially. Then I think the important aspect is obviously cloud accounting for us. For us, that's a big part of actually assisting organizations free up their time and resources, in terms of the cloud accounting solution. We're obviously going to focus on Xero because it is our preferred service provider and we are familiar with that platform. And then we'll go into a bit of project management and collaboration. some of the tools that we as a firm use as well. And then just the future of fundraising. I know that's probably the area which is a lot more exciting for most of you in regard to, what's next, what's out there in terms of being able to actually fundraise in a way that's different. I mean, the world has changed, so surely the way we fundraise as well should. Right, and then we'll obviously just complete or finish off with some of the solutions that we offer nonprofit organizations, and obviously a Q&A at the end for those of you that weren't able to get your questions in. So yeah, just in terms of our firm, we are a firm of chartered accountants that specialize in the nonprofit sector. That's our core focus. So you wouldn't find us, even if you go onto our website, you'd see that it is actually solutions tailored for nonprofit organizations. There's 3 chartered accountants who actually at a partner level, who are all specialists in nonprofit organizations, whether it's audit, whether it's tax, whether it's consulting and compliance, that is our core focus area. So you wouldn't find us actually going out and marketing to private clients and that sort of thing. Having said that, we do offer certain, or we are, service providers for certain specialized taxes to the public sector as well, because of our expertise with regard to taxes like VAT. In terms of our technical expertise, we've got highly qualified individuals. As I mentioned, personally, I've been working in the nonprofit sector now for over 10 years. I think all of us, as chartered accountants, have been qualified chartered accountants for over 15 years. So you've got a lot of industry experience as well and technical expertise. That's a core focus area for us in terms of being able to add value to your organization in terms of the service offering, whether it's tax, whether it's audit and that sort of thing. And that's why we've also got USAID accreditation, for instance. So we are able to offer USAID audits, to nonprofit clients. If you look at our track record, we've worked with some of South Africa's most reputable nonprofit organizations, or even some of them which have a global presence, organizations like Save the Children, the AIDS Foundation of South Africa as well. So yeah, so that's basically our client base. In terms of all our service offerings, we're most happy to actually provide you with references, in terms of organizations that we've worked with as well. And yeah, we are obviously advisors to a number of nonprofit organizations across the country, including funders. A number of funders utilize our services in terms of actually being able to, assist the organizations that they fund as well, because they see value in that, and it allows their RAN to go the full mile, if organizations that they actually fund are set up in an efficient manner and are actually operating in an efficient manner as well. So yeah, that's basically about our firm. To move on, it was interesting that I saw this in a hospital a few weeks ago. Something that the late Steve Jobs mentioned, and it actually stuck with me, especially because I'm someone who actually is a firm believer that our time on the face of this earth is actually the most valuable tool that we could, or the most valuable resource rather, more valuable than any stock or any trade or even the latest cryptocurrency, or any blue chip corporate Fortune 500 company as well. So that's basically, it actually resonates with us, is that for some reason or the other, I'm not sure why, as organizations, we don't value our time sometimes, so even in terms of our resources, the people that we actually have within our organizations, we're quite happy to actually have mundane tasks, actually being carried out without automating some of those processes, and because of that, we then actually lose time in the process. And that's what the cloud gives us. It gives us the ability to actually do things more efficiently, to save that time, to allow us to then obviously free it up and focus on the things that are actually more precious and valuable to us. Whether it's serving a certain cause within our organizations, the activities, volunteering our time, or whatever the case might be. But this is what the cloud does. It allows us to free up our time so we could obviously focus on other aspects of our lives. So why the cloud? Why all the fuss about the cloud? What does the cloud bring? where's the benefit to us? Why should we even make that change and consider moving, our systems, onto a cloud-based platform? We've got servers in house. We're actually quite comfortable with where we are. We've got, fantastic accounting software and tools that we use. So, why should we consider the cloud? So we're just going to go into a few aspects of it. Obviously, we're not going to be able to touch on all of them, but cost savings, for instance, that's the first aspect. Some of you that have moved over, you would see that there's definitely a cost saving in terms of utilizing cloud solutions. Why do I say that? You have a number of platforms which actually offer you a free service or a free package, on these cloud platforms. Yes, it might be quite basic, but you still have, quite a bit of functionality. Let's look at Zoom, for instance. You've got a free package on Zoom, but it's allowed us to collaborate in a way that we never thought would be possible, in terms of having meetings, being able to actually, sit wherever we are, whether we're in a coffee shop or whatever it is, but collaborate quite easily as well. Then if you're looking at something like a server, quite a few people would, or organizations or corporates as well, would have to spend significant sums of money to actually have a server in-house. But with cloud solutions, you actually don't need to have a server. If you're using cloud technology to save documents, for instance, it comes at a fraction of a cost. So it definitely results in a cost saving. So even with regard to data storage in terms of licensing and that sort of thing as well, we're getting technology that would previously be available to governments and perhaps even industries like banks, now available to our organizations and even to us as individuals as well. So the cost saving is definitely one aspect. Then it's something that that I believe is quite critical in terms of being able to collaborate effectively. Previously, the term communication, was actually something that a lot of us would focus on. I remember going through articles. It was all about communication. It will be hounded that we need to be able to communicate effectively, whether it's with your clients, whether it was with your seniors or your fellow colleagues and that sort of thing. But today, I take it a step further. I instead of looking at communication, I would rather focus on collaboration. And what's the difference? Generally with communication, it's perhaps too limited, maybe to individuals, for instance, communicating. But with collaboration, what it allows you to do, it allows us to actually collaborate on multiple fronts with various individuals. Now, what do I mean by that? So if we're working in a team, and if we're using a platform like Google Drive, for instance, what we could do is we could be working on an Excel spreadsheet and or a Google Sheets, and the person sitting at the office, and if I'm sitting at home, you'd have access to the same information. We'd be able to collaborate effectively. So if we're working on a budget, for instance, as opposed to previously where one person works on a budget, what they then need to do is have to actually attach it onto an email, send it to the next person for approval. That person would probably have to download it, make the changes on their side, sign off on it, and then email it back to the person that was waiting for it. Now that entire process is actually now it's redundant. You no longer have to do that. You could actually be reviewing in real time without actually having to even save your changes on a spreadsheet as well. So it makes it a lot easier to now collaborate. Multiple parties can even see information flowing between a few individuals, for instance, right? Previously, if it was via email, you'd obviously send an email to someone within your team, and if you want someone else to have access to that information, you'd obviously have to CC them. But yeah, if you're working on a cloud-based platform, the entire team who you've obviously chosen to give access to can actually see that communication happening in real time and can obviously be part of it as well, right? I know as accountants, for those of you obviously in the accounting field here, a number of you would have, I'm quite certain at some point in your careers, would have forgotten to hit that Control S whilst working on a spreadsheet or on a Word document. And some, maybe there was a power cut or whatever the case might be, and that document is now lost. Those days are long gone. We no longer have to hit Control S. If you're working on a cloud-based platform, it is actually saving automatically. I know many of you would have probably had Pascal files being corrupt at a certain point, and obviously then not having a backup, for instance, for that specific file. So even all of that, it's obviously now gone out of the window in terms of obviously being able to collaborate on a cloud-based platform. And moving on to disaster recovery, as I said, with, for instance, with pastoral files being corrupt, even if your data had to be lost, for instance, I know previously, whenever we'd have to actually go down to a SARS branch in Durban, straight out of articles, I'd be driving down with my City Golf and I'd have my laptop with me. I would never ever leave that laptop, even in the boot of my car. I always said to myself that the data in my laptop is actually more valuable than the vehicle itself. I was willing to let the vehicle go, but not the laptop. So I'd keep that with me and walk into a SaaS branch, because the CBD is obviously not the safest area in Durban if you want to actually, go and get parking on the street and you have your valuables in the vehicle. But now what you could do is, with cloud-based solutions, even if, yes, it comes at a cost if you had to lose your device or if the laptop had to get stolen, but in terms of the data itself and being able to actually start working immediately, all you need to do is you need to then just get access to another device, log into that specific platform, and you can work where you left off. That's the great thing about it. You no longer, okay, I forgot to run a backup, for instance, or, the backup disk was corrupt, or someone had forgotten to actually take the disk out off site and save it remotely, and you had a burglary at the office or a fire, whatever the case might be. Now you no longer have to worry about that with the cloud, because remember, everything is actually saved and synced online. So if that device is lost, if you no longer have access to that device for whatever reason, all you need to do is log in on another device, whether it's another PC, laptop, or even your tablet, and even your mobile phone, and you'd have access to it in real time, where you can actually start working where you left off. And that's where mobility and flexibility comes in, is that it allows you to work on multiple devices. So if I've got a PC at my office and I'm working on my PC, and I get home and I need to obviously continue from where I left off, I don't have to worry. I can get home, work on my tablet or my laptop without having to actually run a backup and then start working on a backed up version of it. That's the great thing about it. Taking it a step further, obviously with COVID and now with remote working becoming the norm, even I think post-COVID, we'll probably find that that's been embraced a lot more than it was the case previously. You're going to have people working a lot more remotely than there has ever been. I saw an article recently where PwC in the United States have said that even post-COVID, their staff no longer have to come into the office. Yet they might need to clock in every couple of weeks for meetings or whatever the case might be. But the option is now available to them to start working remotely. So this is what the cloud allows. It allows us to work in that way. I know Mauritius has even marketed themselves as a remote working destination for foreigners, where you could apply for a visa and be working on a beach. I mean, we could do the same thing here in Durban, if it wasn't obviously for the issues that we've had with the water and that sort of thing here in the ocean. But that's what it allows you to do. It allows you to work on various devices, without having to slot a memory stick in, take the data from another device and transfer it over. It's just a seamless actually transition from multiple devices. I know previously, and I'm sure many of you are like me, who you rub your hands in glee whenever you have to go down to renew your motor vehicle licenses. But as someone who's very impatient, I actually used to dread that, have sleepless nights to go and stand in a line to get your motor vehicle license renewed, or even perhaps, your smart ID. I mean, we weren't as fortunate here in KZN as the guys in the other parts of the country, where our banks were only rolling it out, I think, in the past month or two, to actually get your smart IDs. So what I then do is I'd obviously take my laptop with me, and I'd be sitting in that queue, sometimes even the entire day, and get work done, well, for as long as my battery actually lasted me. Which isn't ideal. I mean, you're sitting in a queue, there's people next to you, but now I can actually work on my mobile phone. There's obviously apps that I've got, so whether it's Zero or whether it's HubSpot or whatever the case might be, I no longer have to carry my laptop with me. I can continue working from my mobile phone, even if it means doing processing or billing clients, for instance. It can all be done from my mobile phone. And when I get back to the office, I just continue where I left off with my PC or laptop, whatever works best for me. So that's the great thing about the cloud so far. Then with regard to automatic updates, I know previously you'd have to obviously load a disk in, and if there's an update that needs to be run, you're going to have to download a file, which generally takes forever. With the cloud-based solutions, the updates actually happen in the background more often than not without you even knowing it. So whatever changes, whether it's the change in the user interface or whether it's a change in terms of the latest update that comes in, it happens without you knowing it. I think that's the great thing about it. Recently, I know we had an issue with our payroll solution, which we haven't moved over to in terms of a cloud-based solution. We're still using a desktop solution with regard to payroll. And this is one of the most reputable payroll companies in the country, whereby we had the changes to the ETI that government obviously introduced because of COVID and the extension of lockdowns and that sort of thing. And what happened was the payroll company actually didn't release the update on time for the ETI to actually be claimed. And we needed to run payrolls. It obviously delayed the entire process because of the update not coming through on time. Now, had it been a cloud-based solution, I'm sure it would have been much, much easier to get that update on our side without any delay in running the payroll at year end, right? Then lastly, with regard to data security, I know it's obviously no system is watertight. There's always going to be the risk of data breach. And we've seen it even, with the most reputable of companies. I mean, we've had, entities across the world. I mean, global companies, some of the biggest companies in the world that actually experience data breaches. So it's not something that's, that anybody can guarantee. However, saying that generally most of the service providers that are offering cloud-based solutions, or should I say the reputable ones, do have the highest security standards. As I mentioned earlier on, you're probably using the security standards that governments and industries like banks would have used in yesteryear. That's now available to us in terms of obviously ensuring that our data and our connections are secure with the highest ISO standards and that sort of thing as well. But having said that, you obviously still need to ensure that you take your measures and implement your measures to ensure that data is always secure. So yeah, that's basically some of the benefits of the cloud. I'm not sure if we've got any questions or any comments at this stage before we move on. Anybody with anything to add, you're most welcome to do so before we move ahead. Guys, are we good to go? Okay. So just moving on in terms of a snapshot of the tech stack. As I mentioned, it's not an all-encompassing list, and neither is this obviously, any sort of recommendation, that we as a firm would obviously sort of stick our necks out for. Yes, we do use certain of these solutions, and it's just to make sure that you're aware of what's out there. I think that's the important thing. So it's not necessarily an endorsement from our side, where we obviously can give you a guarantee on some of these solutions. But as I mentioned, it's there for information purposes, so you're aware of the actual options that are available to you in terms of the various tech solutions that you could implement within your organization. Now, I want you to take a moment and just think about this. Those of you who are in a position to actually, appoint individuals, so if you're in an executive position within your organization, or perhaps you are in the HR department, maybe, I want you to think about whether you've come across, or how many CVs have you come across at any point in your career, whether it's within a non-profit organization or in any role that you might have been. But how many CVs have you perhaps come across that would have had some of these tech solutions as an expertise or an area of expertise for any individual? I can guarantee you that, as obviously a partner in a firm, we take on article clerks every year. And, over and above that, over and above article clerks, we're obviously, looking for supervisors and assistant managers. So we're always recruiting. I've never, ever seen a CV with any of these tech solutions. In fact, the CVs that I come across are exactly the same as the CV that I would have prepared in the early 2000s or in the late 90s. You'd have your usual, expertise in advanced Excel, Pascal, PowerPoint, all of those things in there. It hasn't changed at all. Yet there's been such a significant move and shift in terms of tech, but it seems like the skills that we've developed over the years hasn't moved with that. Even as accountants, even as accountants at the forefront, of change, and obviously having to keep, abreast with the latest amendments and things like that, we seem to be stuck in the old way of doing things, and that's why I always maintain even when it comes to tech solutions, yes, whilst it's obviously ultimately to benefit your organization, but we as individuals would also benefit from these skills. It will give us an opportunity to develop skills that we wouldn't otherwise have, by embracing the technology solutions that are actually available out in the marketplace. You'd be able to learn things that you, or even that's outside of your role in terms of your current position as well, by actually embracing some of the solutions and technology that's available to us, right? So I'm not going to obviously go into each of them in detail. We will cover some of them, but just to make you aware, in terms of some of the ones that we won't be going through in detail, but you've got solutions on here like cloud-based payroll solutions. Simple Pay and PaySpace is one of, or just a couple of them. I know with one of the solutions, you actually have technology whereby as staff members, you can via a secure WhatsApp connection get access to your payslip on your mobile phone. So if you're out at a bank or you're out taking out a cell phone contract and you need access to your latest payslip, and now you forgot to print it out at the office, for instance, you no longer have to go back and make another appointment or come back another day. You basically go on in real time and get access to that payslip, right? Another tool that we've used recently in the past year or so is Wamly. Wamly is a South African product. What it actually allows you to do is, especially in the recruitment process itself, right? So previously, what we'd normally do is whenever we get CVs on our desk, we're going to have to actually interview each of those candidates and then shortlist from there, right? With Wamly, what it allows us to do is that it allows us to actually have predefined questions on the cloud or on the platform itself where we can put in these questions, and we can then allocate a time in terms of how long a candidate should take to answer those questions. What then happens is a link is sent to the candidate. The candidate can then actually upload a video of themselves actually answering each of those questions, right? So what does this allow us to do? It allows us to now start, obviously, the recruitment process, and actually we're able to now shortlist candidates much easier before the actual interview process. So we might want to focus on a few key questions within that interview. And as opposed to getting someone into the office to go through an interview, we can actually do it remotely. The candidate can do it at whenever they want to, at their own time, and we can also do so and assess it at our own time and our leisure as well, whenever we wish to actually go in and assess that candidate. If we find that we obviously want to move ahead with the interview process thereafter, we can do so as well. So it's a fantastic tool. You can tailor the questions. There's even a free package available as well. So it costs absolutely nothing to your organization if you're going down that route, right? Then we've obviously got some of the CRM tools, the customer relationship management tools. I know some of these products like HubSpot and Zoho perhaps have specific solutions for nonprofit organizations as well. This basically allows you, so for instance, if I was a nonprofit organization, or if I were actually working in a nonprofit organization, what I would do is, in terms of actually managing my donor relationship, I'd be actually looking at a tool that would automate that entire process, where all my donor details actually kept in this secure space, where I can see exactly the contact details of all my donors, the email addresses, when last did I correspond with them, how were their reactions to the campaigns, what was the success rates of the campaigns that have gone out, if I've sent out emails to my donors, what was the success of those emails, was I able to convert that into a donation, or when last did the specific donor actually support my organization, for instance. But it actually automates that entire process in terms of managing that relationship with your donor. Moving on to something like Calendly, right? What Calendly does is that it allows you to actually automate your appointments and schedules. So especially with many of us working remotely, it's no longer, okay, we go in, we have a management meeting at 9 a.m. every Monday morning. For instance, on here, what you could do is you can set up on your own calendar your available times and send out the link to someone else, and they can then go in and choose a suitable time based on your availability to actually schedule that meeting. It makes it a lot easier, as opposed to having to actually go back and forth, where you have to send an email between parties to see when is everyone available to schedule that meeting. We can now go in and schedule those meetings automatically. It then updates and syncs to your online calendar as well. So it's able to pick up. So if you've added something unrelated into your calendar, it will block out that time, and obviously shows that time as unavailable if anybody wishes to schedule a meeting with you, right? Another tool that we've obviously we're quite familiar with, and which is we've obviously been using, is something called Canva. Canva is actually a tool which allows you to actually design your own brochures, your own social media posts, proposals, basically anything with regard to marketing. If you want to design a logo, for instance, you're doing a rebranding of your organization. Now, I know, yes, we might not have the skill set to do it, and a lot of the time we'd probably go out and get a graphic designer, for instance, to do this. But what we do find sometimes is that either at a cost or whatever the case might be, to actually manage those processes can become quite costly. Especially as a non-profit organization, when we work with limited budgets, with a tool like Canva, you've got templates that are already available for you, and you can tailor those templates according to your own needs and requirements. So if you want to bring in your logo to a specific template, you could do so. You could change the color schemes, for instance. And it comes in. I mean, you've got a free package and you've got a paid package, but rest assured, those packages are literally minimal. If you're paying per year, if you're making use of social media posts and where you got it syncing to your Facebook feeds or Instagram or whatever the case might be, it's well worth it. It's well worth looking at. And these templates are constantly updated. That's the great thing about it as well. Also, in terms of marketing, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with a platform called, well, I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing it correctly, whether it's Fiverr or Fiverr, but basically it's a global platform where any individual can actually freelance their services. So you've got individuals who probably work for some of the biggest corporates in the world who actually you can appoint to actually do certain maybe voiceover for a campaign that you're running or an advert that you're running, or you need to actually revamp your entire website, for instance. You can actually go and get in industry experts, and you can shortlist and choose candidates from any corner of the globe. Now think about this. Previously, if we needed to obviously revamp our website, what we generally have to do is we'd obviously have to find someone or a firm or a company who does it, and you're working with someone in your vicinity or in your area, and that's how you'd go about doing it. The world has changed. We've now crossed barriers, and it's become a global marketplace where we've got access to expertise in any part of the world. And I'm talking about experts across the spectrum. I mean, you've got data capturers, you've got graphic designers, you've got voiceover artists, you name it, it's all available to you on there. And again, very cost effective as well. Over and above that, I mean, if there's anybody on here with obviously certain expertise and tools, and you want to freelance in terms of services, if your obviously job allows you to do so, there's a platform for you. Lastly, MailChimp. Obviously, this is an automated sort of mailing list feature where instead of having to actually send manual emails to your donors, if you've got your donors on a platform like this, you could sync it, and that's a great thing. A lot of these solutions actually sync with each other. So it sort of removes the mundane task of actually having to now set up a schedule for an email to go out from Canva at a certain time, for instance. So if you can have it synced in, you can have that email automatically sent out, pulling the data in or pulling that actual campaign in from another platform, and for it to go out at a certain time as well. Right. So that's just a snapshot of some of the solutions. Obviously, there's a lot more out there. And I'm sure you guys, would probably have access or would have used certain solutions. And remember, I mean, things like Google Drive and OneDrive and that sort of thing are all part of the cloud-based solutions that are available as well. So as I mentioned, it's not an all-encompassing feature in terms of everything that's out there. It's just some of the tools that we think that will be of value to your organization in terms of actual various operating various aspects of your entity. Before we move ahead, I'm not sure if there's any comments at this stage as well. Perhaps anybody who has used specific tools within their organization and have found it to be quite valuable, and you're willing to share that with the other organizations in the platform, you're most welcome to do so. there's any questions at this stage, any comments, anybody might have used some of these solutions and your thoughts on it as well, perhaps. Nothing at this stage, I gather. Okay, moving on. I would hope that some of you on here would actually be familiar with this. This is obviously your old trial balance, and it used to be captured in this way. Even your cash book or your general ledger, and it used to actually be captured manually previously. And having looked at this, I thought to myself, how much has really changed if we're still capturing bank statements from PDF? And the reality is not much. If we're still using PDF bank statements and we're actually capturing data into our accounting system in this way, then we really haven't moved away from handwriting information into a ledger. All we've done is we've moved over from doing it into in a book format into our computers. We still have to type in the information. So for instance, if we made a payment to Telkom and if we're capturing it from the bank statement, we're still going to have to type in the date. We're still going to have to type in the amount. We're still going to have to type in the description as well. Yes, the calculation in terms of balancing it, that might be, or the subtotals, that might be automated, but the rest of it in terms of capturing, it's still very much a manual process itself. So let's hope that most of us or all of us on here have moved beyond capturing PDF bank statements in terms of the old way of doing things. What we'd obviously like to move on to is the cloud-based accounting solution and the cloud-based process that we feel is best practice that you should consider following as well, right? So if you're not on the cloud currently with your accounting package, you need to ask yourself the questions why. That's the first thing. You need to think about it carefully as to why you haven't made that move to a cloud-based accounting solution already. Some of these solutions have been around for a number of years. And if you're aware, whilst yes, we actually use Xero as being our preferred service provider, there are various other solutions out there as well, whether it's QuickBooks Online, Sage Online as well. These are all cloud-based accounting solutions, right? So all of your accounting service providers or accounting software service providers now have what they call cloud-based solutions, but there's obviously differences between each one of them, right? We've gone, as I mentioned, with Xero. Xero is a global entity, started off in New Zealand many years ago by an individual who's not an accountant, by the way. It was someone who was tired of taking his documents to his accountant and driving around the island in New Zealand, although it wouldn't have taken that much of time, but to actually send his information to his accountant to process. He used to put it in a box, get it down to him, and he thought to himself, shucks, I'm not going to be doing this anymore. It's wasting too much of my time. And that's when the obviously, the option of having a cloud-based solution such as Xero coming about, right? So in terms of, our process that we follow as a firm in terms of actual best practice, and this is just a suggestion, we've actually followed a process whereby you obviously start off with your data extraction. That's the most important thing in terms of capturing of that data, bringing in that data into your accounting system. Currently, many organizations still do it manually, and that's what we try to move away from. We obviously want to automate this process as much as we can, and there are solutions that allow for this. So if we had to obviously go on in terms of taking on an organization into Xero, or an organization has been brought on to a cloud-based solution for the first time, we use a tool called Cloud Convert. What this does, it allows you to actually convert your previous data. So if you're moving from a different accounting system, it allows you to convert that data automatically without any errors, and as opposed to you having to manually bring in balances. And doing it this way, it gives you access to the history on those transactions as well, right? It literally happens in real time. It doesn't take a long time at all, and you're good to go. You've got your opening balances, gives you a report so you can see that there's no errors in terms of that data bring in.
And you know what? When we ask the question,
sorry about that, guys. Okay, so that's in terms of the data conversion, in terms of bringing in information for the first time into your cloud-based solution, right? Thereafter, we use tools, or there's a few tools that we use to bring in information from an expense perspective, right? So we use something called HubDoc, which is part of Zero. It's a company that's obviously that's part of the Zero network itself. And then you've also got Zero Expenses, which is an app on the phone. Now, how does HubDoc work, right? What it allows you to do is, I mean, I'm sure most of you today get invoices emailed. Whether it's Telcom, whether it's your telecommunications, Vodacom, or whatever the case might be, most of your invoices today would actually be emailed to you, right? Now, what HubDocs allows you to do it allows you to actually automatically extract the information from those supplier invoices. So previously, if you were obviously or you actually accounting for on an accrual basis and obviously raising invoices, you'd have to manually raise that invoice, capture the amount, capture it into your supplier module, and raise that payable into your accounting system, right? With HubDocs, what happens is that you'd have a unique email address, so you can actually set up an auto forward whereby any supplier invoices coming into your email box can be auto forwarded into HubDocs. What HubDocs does thereafter, it automatically extracts certain key pieces of information: the date, the invoice number, the supplier name, the amount, the VAT on there. All you then need to do is you need to just go in and approve those amounts, right? And the great thing about it is that the invoice itself will be attached on there for you to view as well, right? What happens is that that expense then gets brought into Zero as a payable as well. Then you've got something called Zero Expenses. Now, a number of non-profit organizations have multiple sites. So you probably have a head office, and you might have a site out somewhere which needs to have cash, whereby they obviously incur expenses on a cash basis. That's quite normal. We find that it happens quite frequently. The problem, though, is how do you manage that cash? How do you manage those expenses? Because very often what you find is that the till slips that you get fade over time. So whether it's from Pick and Pay or whatever, any ShopRite or any other supermarket or macro, you do find that those till slips tend to fade, right? Now, what happens is with Zero Expenses, what you can then do is with your mobile phone, you can take a picture of that specific invoice or till slip. And similar to how HubDocs does data extraction, the same thing happens, is that the data gets extracted from that till slips and the expense gets brought into Zero for you to then approve as well, right? So can you imagine if you've got recurring supplier invoices like this, it actually automates the entire process of now having to bring in your expenses, right? The next aspect thereafter, what you then would do is using something called automatic bank feeds, right? Now, how does automatic bank feeds work? I know you have, in certain solutions, even desktop solutions, you have something where you can, or you have something similar where you can set up. I know Pastel had something called Pastel Bank Manager, whereby you'd set up your bank to actually pull through transactions, right? Or you have a CSV bank statement being pulled through, which already shows the data. Right? That's all well and good. It works pretty well as well. However, with automatic bank feeds, what happens is that once you set up this bank feed, the data is now from your bank account or from your transactions is now pulled through automatically. That's the thing. It's pulled through automatically, whereby you don't necessarily have to go in and now bring in or upload that CSV bank statement, for instance. Once it's set up, you no longer have to do it. So in real time, the data from your bank statements is being pulled through into the accounting system. So think about this for a second. What happens with something like this? Your processing is no longer being done monthly. You can actually do processing in real time. We've actually moved away to a process whereby for our clients now, we actually try to get processing done on a weekly basis. What it does is that it frees up your time at month end, because generally most accountants at month end, it's the worst time of the year. It's obviously reporting deadline, it's payroll, it's EMP 201s, it's VAT 201s, all of those things happening at the same time. With something like this, you're no longer running around at month end and under pressure, because your processing is up to date during the month. And think about it, you're sitting with a funder, perhaps a big funder. You might not have your laptop with you, but your processing is up to date, and he wants to see a project report for year-to-date figures. From your mobile phone, you're able to actually run that report in real time while sitting across the desk from him, And you can go through and see, okay, these are what the numbers looking like. These are the donations to date. This is what our deficit is for the specific project, for instance, in real time. You're no longer waiting a month or 2 months down the line to get your processing done, right? So that's one aspect in terms of processing of the bank statement. Now, what happens with that? With those automatic bank fees, what happens then? Now, you've got your expenses that are already sitting in your accounting system, which have been brought through either via HubDocs or zero expenses. Now, what happens is that I'm going to use the example of Telkom again. You've made a payment to Telkom, it's reflected on your bank statement. The invoice is already sitting in zero and has been approved as a valid expense. When those the transactions are pulled through from your bank statement via the automatic bank feed, it's immediately doing a search for the corresponding supplier invoice or the expense that has been brought into zero. And it's already making a suggestion to you to reconcile that payment to that specific expense. So you no longer have to manually allocate that payment to the specific expense to get rid of the creditor that's sitting in the balance sheet. It happens automatically. All you then need to do is you obviously just hit OK and approve it, right? To take it a step further, for those transactions where you might not necessarily have invoices that come through, right? But you're still incurring expenses. So if I had to use an example, you've got bank charges, you've got your debit orders that go through perhaps for insurance, or even salaries and wages, for instance. There's obviously no invoices that come through for those specific transactions. Now, with bank rules, what happens is that you can schedule it once off for zero to identify that specific transaction on the bank statement. So if there's a debit order that actually went through to Santam, for instance, to identify that if the supplier name is Santam, then zero needs to recognize that it is for insurance and it is a VATable cost, and then identify and process that transaction automatically as soon as it finds it on the bank statement. And that's exactly what it does. Likewise with bank charges, it will identify. So for instance, if you put a criteria for it to search for service fees, for instance, it would search for that. If it picks up service fees, it would automatically allocate to bank charges, process the VAT. All you need to then do is look at it and say, yes, it's correct. If there's a correction that needs to be made, you then obviously can correct it and allocate it to the correct account at that point in time. So that's the beauty of actually automating these entire processes. It takes out the manual and laborious task of actually having to manually capture bank statements and bring things in manually. I think that's the great part of it, is that the entire process is automated. As the last leg of that processing function, let's just assume that there's a few queries you may be responsible for processing, but you're not sure what a specific transaction on the bank statement related to. What you could do is you can raise a query on zero, and the person in charge of procurement, for instance, can have access to it and actually address that query without you processing the transaction, and then you can then process it thereafter. Right. With regard to the last leg with regard to PDF bank statements, so let's look at it. Let's assume that you have an organization who, for whatever reason, we haven't done our processing for a number of months, and we need to obviously get our processing up to date. Now, previously, again, you'd probably have to do it manually. With something called Swift CSV, what we can do is we can actually convert those PDF bank statements into a format which brings it into zero, and then can apply the bank rules to actually automate that entire processing of those PDF bank statements as well. So as you can imagine, something that would probably take hours on end has now obviously been significantly reduced in terms of the time that we'd normally have to spend doing so, right? So that's the data extraction process. Guys, any questions thus far? We will go through a demo shortly, but in terms of the data extraction aspect of the capturing of information into an accounting program or accounting software, any questions thus far? Nothing at this point. Okay, then in terms of the reconciliation and review process. Now, previously, if you had to obviously reconcile, or you're undertaking a review, the information would have to probably be sent to you manually. So you'd have to have a report downloaded, maybe in Excel or PDF or whatever the case might be, emailed to you. You'd have to go through that and then sign off on it and send it back to the person, giving you a thumbs up and approval of that actual report, right? Things have changed. You no longer have to do that. What a cloud-based solution such as this would do is it would allow you to have access to that report online. You could be sitting in an airport in any part of the world. As long as you've got access to the internet, you can go in and approve a specific report. For instance, you can go in and review your management accounts at month end as well without it having to be emailed to you. You can go in at any time and have a look to see how many transactions are still to be reconciled by the accountants, for instance. It gives you that sort of information at the touch of a button, right? So the management review process also happens within the product itself, right? It's no longer done outside of it. So even in terms of reviewing an expense, if an expense needs to be approved that was incurred, you can go and have a look at that invoice that's on there and actually mark that as approved and ready for payment, right? As I mentioned early on, we've moved away from monthly bank reconciliation, and we've now taken this to be a weekly recon. And I think that's what makes it fantastic. It allows you to do these things in real time, right? Furthermore, data storage. I know it's a huge issue for many organizations. Data storage is quite a challenge. We have lever arch files whereby we keep all our invoices, and you have to keep it for 5 years and that sort of thing. Now with a solution such as this, your invoices are actually stored online. It's linked to that specific transaction. So if you want to go in at any point, if you want to go back 3 years and have a look at an invoice that was incurred 3 years ago, all you need to do is you drill down to that specific transaction, look for that payment, click on the payment, and the invoice comes out on screen. Now think about this. In terms of your audit, currently, I'm sure your auditors send you a sample listing of invoices, and you manually have to obviously provide them with those invoices. Now, all you need to do is you merely give the auditors access to the platform, and they can go in and have a look at the invoices at their own time, whenever they please, or whichever invoices they wish to. So that's the beauty of it in terms of actually having having the data storage being online and linked to that specific transaction as well, right? I see there's a question that's come up. Is there a solution for NPOs managing a charity shop? So there's various third-party solutions. So for instance, I'm assuming that the question relates to a point of sale, perhaps for the charity shop, which links into Xero. If that's the case, then there's various third-party, there's I think over 800 third-party apps that integrate into a product like Xero, from stock management to point of sale systems and that sort of thing. Believe me, there's a hell of a lot out there, which you could implement into your charity shop as well. So yes, it is possible for you to have this implemented in your charity shop. I'm not sure whether that's the question. I don't know whether you want to come in now and maybe just elaborate on that. I don't know whether I've answered the question. Okay, moving on. In terms of real-time reporting, in terms of, as I said, your management accounts and your financial statements, again, all done in real time. There should be absolutely no reason why your nonprofit organization is late in actually now submitting financial statements, whether it's to DSD or whether it's obviously submitting your income tax returns because of a delay in financial statements being prepared at year end. There should absolutely be no reason for that if you're using a cloud-based solution such as this, right? Over and above just your reporting, what it also allows you to do is submit your VAT returns in real time directly from Xero itself. So think about this. Previously, what would happen is that you'd run your VAT report itself, and what would then happen is that you'd have to obviously then log into e-filing, and you'd then complete your VAT return online. Thereafter, if it goes under audit, for you to obviously get your refunds from SARS, what would then happen is that you'd have to actually then go back in and now upload information and try and locate those invoices, prepare your schedules and that sort of thing to provide support. Now, with a product like Xero, it syncs directly into e-filing. But you obviously give it that authority. It doesn't happen automatically. You need to set it up, and you need to still initiate that submission of the VAT return itself. So what happens is that you no longer have to log into e-filing to actually submit the return itself. Once you're happy with that specific period's VAT return, you go in, you approve it, and you submit directly from Xero with that automatic link. Thereafter, if you need to actually provide SARS with supporting invoices, for instance, it's all on Xero already. It makes it so much easier for you to actually manage that process. Now, just looking at this screen itself, can you imagine how much of time could be saved if you are using a cloud-based accounting solution like this and actually making full use of all the tools that are available within these solutions? I think that's the important thing. Is the one thing is to actually start utilizing it, but I think it's maximizing the tools in terms of data extraction and automation in doing so. Right, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to a small demo on Xero itself, just so you can get a feel for what's it about. And I think it puts into perspective, what we've discussed so far. I'm just going to share my screen. If you can just give me a second. Okay, can I get a thumbs up from someone or a yes if you can see my browser screen? Perfect. Okay, so basically this is the user interface. This is what Xero looks like. As I mentioned, obviously a cloud-based solution. So you've got access to it on your web browser. You've got a mobile app as well. You can access it on your tablet, available to you at any time. So even, I mean, you don't necessarily, have to be linked to it or be set up on a specific actual device. So, previously you'd obviously have your desktop accounting solution and it would only be accessible on that specific device. Those days are obviously long gone. Now, as you can see, this is obviously a demo company, within the Xero product itself. So the functionality is quite limited, being a demo itself. But basically what happens is when you log on, this is your dashboard, right? As I mentioned earlier on, remember so over and above, so even those of you that have your accounting outsourced, right? As an organization, you would also have access to this information. So you're no longer purely reliant on your accountant to give you access or to send you these reports. You can go in at any time and have a look at these reports. So your accountant has access along with yourself. And remember, you're not paying per user. That's the other advantage. So you can have multiple individuals within an organization have access to your Xero account. And obviously you can then limit access in terms of certain functionalities and user rights and that sort of thing, depending on the individual's roles and responsibilities within your organization. So let's assume, you obviously have your accounting outsourced. You come in and you want to have a look at, okay, where are you with your processing? Are you up to date? And you can see on here that this statement balance was or transactions were last brought in on the 18th of October. Right, so you know that you're 2 weeks behind. For some odd reason, the bank feed hasn't been refreshed. The bank feed hasn't been brought up to date. So you can obviously start asking the questions, why hasn't that been done? Or if you're responsible for it on your own, you can obviously go in at this point. If you had a bank feed set up, it would allow you on here to refresh that bank feed and bring those transactions in. So let's just assume that you did processing up until yesterday and you go in today, and for whatever reason, you need to bring those transactions up to date up until today. You can still go in and do that. You can go in and do it up until any point that you want to, where it will then pull through those transactions from your bank account in real time, right? Now, this dashboard, you can obviously tailor it according to your needs. So I can move things around. If I go in on here at the bottom, I can edit this dashboard. I can delete things or I can add stuff on here as well, depending on your own needs. Even in terms of the account watch list, so if you want to see your donation income for that specific month, or your grant income, you can have those sort of GL accounts reflected under your account watch list on here, right? Now, in terms of the reconciliation, this is where the magic really happens in terms of all the processing, right? Now you can access this, that's the good thing about it, is that you can access it via various screens. Not only where, you're limited, you have to go into your cash book in a specific area. So all I do is if I click on here, for instance, right, I'd be able to then go in and drill down to where the reconciliation happened. I'm not sure if you recall when I mentioned earlier on the matching that it does. Now, can you see these transactions on here? Remember, on the left of the screen in the gray, these are transactions that would be pulled through automatically from your bank statement, right? Now, what's happened on here? Within zero, you would have raised an invoice. Oh, sorry, this was a bill rather. Let me just find an invoice for you. There we go. So this is a spent amount. Right, this is a payment that went through the bank statement for 1,181.25 cents. And you would have an invoice from this specific supplier that would have been brought through into zero. What the system has done is that it's actually looked within your system, and it's matched the bank transaction against this, and it's given you a suggestion to ask you whether it should reconcile, right? And you can then merely hit OK, and if it's reconciled thereafter. If I go further down, right, there's something called your bank fees. Now, where you would have set up a bank rule where there's obviously no invoice, but what would happen is that the system would obviously search, or the system would have identified that there's a bank charge on here, and it would apply the bank rule that you would have already set up. Now, if you want to set up your bank rule, you go on there and you can create a bank rule. So it would have obviously said in terms of the bank rule itself that search for a specific description, maybe Ridgeway Bank, for instance, and take that to the bank fee or bank charges account. And that's what it would have done on here, right? So this is where your processing happens. In terms of actually taking it a step further, right? If we had used automatic bank feeds and cash coding or your bank rules, right? You can literally get your processing done in a click of one button. This is what it actually enables you to do. Can you guys imagine, compared to how we currently process, where each of these items would probably have to be manually captured, taken into a specific GL account, and go down and you drill down into it, and then you decide where you want to process it, choose your VAT rate, for instance, although here it says region, but you can maybe allocate it to a specific project. Doing that manually compared to if you had set up bank rules for all your transactions, right? And you have using obviously a product like HubDocs where it brings that through automatically. Now what happens is that all of these fields, your account description, your tax rate, should all have been pre-populated already. If it is already pre-populated, like this transaction for 15 Rand 50 in terms of the 7-Eleven here on the 13th of October, if the rest of them were actually processed in the same way where you've got bank feeds set up and you've got your bank rules set up, when you come onto this screen, there should be absolutely no blank fields on here. You should be able to look at the screen, and if you need to make any change, if there's been an error in terms of an allocation of a payment PAMS, the 7-Eleven should have been taken to entertainment as opposed to office expenses, for instance, you can obviously go on here and you can make that change it to office expenses. But in terms of then approving and reconciling, you click one button and your processing for that month is done and dusted. And as accountants, you can sit back and relax and actually look forward to month end for a change, right? That's in terms of the actual processing itself. To take it a step further, let's assume that there was an error that was made, right? There was an error in terms of you reconciled an item and you took it to the incorrect account. All you then have to do is you click that specific transaction. So let's just say on here, all you do is opposed to where previously you'd have to pass a journal. Here, all you do is you remove and redo. You can currently see that there's 26 transactions to reconcile, right? All you do is remove and redo. Once you do that, you can see it's now taken you to 27. And you can then really just reconcile that transaction again if you made an error. Now, I know previously you'd have to process a journal entry, and if you've got VAT, you'd get the debits and credits wrong, and it used to be an absolute nightmare to do so if there's an error. Here, it makes things so much easier to go in and correct a transaction that was processed in error. Remember, if you've got a concern in terms of someone going in and actually making changes to the system, there's a full audit trail, and you can run those reports, which gives you exactly which user has made which change and at which time as well, or at what time rather. So that's not a concern or not an issue at all. There's absolutely no risk in that regard, right? So that's basically the bank in terms of how that aspect works. I just want to take you in terms of the next aspect. We're not going to focus on income on here, obviously most of you being non-profit organizations, and I would assume not many of you do any invoicing in terms of any business income. But if you do, for instance, let's just say as a non-profit organization, you have rental income that you incur on or that you actually generate rather on a monthly basis, you can actually set up recurring invoices where you go in and you set up this invoice to be sent out on a specific date every single month. It would then even send out reminders for you, together with automatically sending out a statement to that customer, for instance, or if you undertake training or whatever the case might be, but you can do this automatically as well from the invoices module as well, right? Now, previously, if you had to invoice, what you'd have to do is you'd have to obviously then run the statement and you'd have to manually send out the statement on here. Here you can set up rules where the statements can be sent over maybe a specific period. Maybe if the debtor is over 30 days and he still owes you that money, you can go through. But we're obviously not going to focus too much on that because, I mean, most nonprofit organizations, your income is primarily in the form of donations and grants, right? We're going to look at bills to pay. Bills to pay, basically, that's your supplier invoices, right? It's obviously international terminology that they've used here. They call it a bill, but it's literally what you would call a supplier invoice, right? Now, this is where your expenses get brought in. As you can see on here, simple self-explanatory tabs where it goes from, you can search for any of your invoices, or you've got draft invoices on here, but we're going to move on to awaiting payment. Now, before I move on to sort of the waiting invoices or sort of awaiting supply invoices, awaiting payment, as you can see, there's an option to create a bill from email. This is similar to HubDocs, whereby a unique email address gets generated, and that supplier invoice, you can set up your Outlook email to auto forward that email into Xero. Once you do that, that invoice would appear on your, depending on how you've got it set up, it can either appear as a draft where you want to then get another third party to actually approve it. Someone else wouldn't because of segregation of duties. You might have someone that would want to actually approve that, or you could have it awaiting approval, or finally awaiting payment. If you can just give me a second, apologies, but my battery seems to be running a bit low. Just give me a second. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm back with you. Apologies for that. Yeah, as I was saying, so if you've obviously set it up in such a way that those invoices that obviously have been automatically sent through the supplier invoices are awaiting payment, this is where it would now appear, right? It would appear on here, and all you then have to do is when you're making payment, you can actually set up these payments to even automatically pull through into your bank account as well. That's obviously a separate separate module that's available, but it would allow that functionality where you don't even have to manually capture these payments into your bank account. It will already be on there, and you can then pay it as a batch as well, right? Now, if there was an invoice on here, you'd be able to view that specific invoice using this button, right? Making it much, much easier for you to actually track your expense invoices. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, in terms of the Xero Expenses app, where you could have till slips or petty cash that's being incurred, and generally those claims get lost, or you could have staff that travel out of town and they would obviously need to submit their travel claims. This is where those claims would come through via the app. So you'd process it via the app itself, and the person approving would be able to do so via this page. So as you can see on here, it will give you the option to review or to pay, and once it's done, it gets pulled through automatically into your specific expenses, right? I just want to touch on one more aspect before we actually close off on Xero, which is another fantastic tool, apologies, is the fixed assets module, right? Now, I know many nonprofit organizations, unfortunately, manage their fixed asset registers on Excel. Depreciation calculations get done in Excel, and the depreciation entries obviously have to be brought through via a journal, right? With Xero, what happens is that once your asset is brought in, into the actual into this module, which is part of your standard package, right? What happens is that you can actually run your depreciation automatically. What happens is that the depreciation calculation gets done and the entry gets recognized into your system. So if you want to run your depreciation monthly, you can do it monthly. If you want to run it biannually or annually, however you wish to do it. You can do it as and when you please without having to manually calculate your depreciation any longer. And you've obviously got all your fixed assets, and on here you can obviously export it into Excel in terms of your fixed asset register, and you can track all of your assets on here as well. Right? So I think that's the great part about Xero itself in terms of obviously the functionality. Some of the other aspects, it's got a great help function. At any time you can go in and there's a whole library of support available to you. You can go in and, similar to a Google search, you can literally search for anything on here and it will obviously give you that support in terms of assistance that you might require, right? Guys, any more questions at this stage with regard to cloud-based accounting solutions? We obviously, because of time, we're not going to be able to touch on all aspects of the solution itself or Xero itself, but believe me, we're just scratching on the surface in terms of some of the tools and the functionality that's available currently. And remember, the other thing to bear in mind is that with a solution such as this, there's constant changes, there's constant improvements in terms of even your management reports, in terms of functionality, in terms of like, for instance, something like the VAT 201s. It wasn't always there to something that was introduced recently, where they've been on this campaign called Making VAT Digital. So these are obviously aspects that get introduced over time, and it doesn't come at an additional cost, as I mentioned to you. The one thing, Xero does offer non-profit organizations a 25% discount on the monthly subs on their program, right, on their solutions. So we're just going to go back to our presentation.
Reza, can I just ask you a
yes,
question?
Please go for it.
Yeah, with your existing system, for example, if you're using Pastel, does Pastel go away and you replace it with Xero, or does Xero work alongside Pastel?
Correct. It basically would be a replacement for Pastel.
Okay.
Right. So to do all that Pastel would do, exact same things as Pastel would basically, and I think with obviously a bit more functionality.
And is Xero just used by nonprofits, or is it used by?
No. It's actually a global solution, not only for nonprofit organizations, obviously small businesses as well. That's their main sort of market, as opposed to your big, large blue chip corporate organization. It's a full accounting, obviously a cloud-based accounting solution for small to medium-sized businesses, as well as nonprofit organizations. They're quite big in the UK as well, the US, obviously New Zealand, Australia, and they've been growing quite aggressively in South Africa.
Thank you.
I think there's, okay, there's a question with regard to migration and training, offered by Xero. So basically what happens is that your data conversion does happen, as I mentioned, with Cloud Convert, right? They do have a free package where the data can get converted at no cost to the organization. So if you're coming in from QuickBooks or Pastel, for instance, then it does get obviously brought in automatically with that. With regard to training itself, right, what happens is that Xero does have a Xero certified advisor course, right? They've got that available obviously specifically for accountants and bookkeepers, but over and above that, there's an entire library of information that's available to you, where you can obviously go in and go through. There's videos, there's obviously lots of content in terms of articles and that sort of thing. So it's up to you entirely in terms of which aspect of it you'd want to focus on. But generally it's pretty, self-explanatory. It's not a difficult product to work with if you obviously have, basic accounting knowledge. I think that's quite important. But the help function is also there, and that library of information itself. But they wouldn't necessarily directly, have a course for you to go on to upskill you in terms of, being familiar with the tool itself. Right, so that's obviously cloud accounting and the solutions that are available, in terms of the cloud accounting, and that space. But yeah, guys, I would really, and we've made this transition. It took us a while. I'm going to be honest with you. We've been looking at it even pre-COVID for about 2 to 3 years, as to whether we should make that change over. And then last year we finally took the leap of faith, and I can assure you we haven't looked back. It's really been a fantastic journey. The support that you get from them in real time as well it's really, really a fantastic product. You know, the entire user experience, the user interface, we obviously shortlisted a few options that were available to us, and we eventually went down this route. It wasn't an easy decision. Someone like myself, I mean, I've always been part of Pastel for over 10 years. You know, we've obviously been at the forefront. I remember a few years ago, Pastel actually rolled out, you know, their Pastel partner for NPOs at some of the events that we had hosted with Iqraa previously as well. You know, so, but obviously there comes a time where change, you know, has to be needed, and sometimes that's the only constant in life. So yeah, moving on, you know, in terms of the next aspect, just want to see if there's any more questions. Okay, it's great that someone else can also vouch for it on here as well. So that's wonderful. But yeah, in terms of project management, you know, again, something that I'm quite passionate about, you know, obviously as a firm, you know, you're working in different teams on multiple projects, you know, and we no longer work in silos. Especially, I think that's what COVID's really taught us, is that, you know, we need to be able to work in an efficient way and collaborate, you know, and again, I'm going to go on the tool or the term collaboration. You know, I'm quite big on this, you know, and I really believe that, you know, with collaboration, it prevents people from having to follow up with one another, for instance, you know, if we collaborate. So to give you a simple example, you know, if let's just say you have allocated a task to someone and you need to review something, and that task is dependent on two individuals, obviously having to actually undertake a specific part of that project. You know, previously you'd have to follow up with each individual, for instance, and now it's no longer the case. If you can collaborate, what it allows you to do, so if the first individual obviously has completed a task and is then sent that information to the second, you already can see that happening. You can see that that information has been shared already, and you're perhaps on track in terms of meeting that deadline. You no longer have to go and follow up with the second person. Has the first one shared the information, and are we looking good in terms of that deadline, for instance? So I think that's the important thing, is that, you know, it allows you to do that. It allows everybody to see on one page, you know, where we are with specific tasks. Now, we've used a tool called Asana. I'm not sure how many of you have used this. I know there's various other tools. There's a tool called Trello as well, but we found that Asana works well for us because it integrates into Microsoft Teams, right? I know they do have a solution for nonprofit organizations and even a free solution as well, right? What this allows you to do is basically it allows us to work together towards a common goal, right? And I know, you know, in nonprofit organizations, especially the guys that are in finance, for instance, you're not necessarily just in charge of accounting. You're wearing multiple hats. You're doing proposals, and you know, you're managing SaaS on one side. You're probably handling payroll and HR as well, and you're doing a bit of fundraising and obviously strategic direction for the organization also. So we're wearing multiple caps within the organization, and that's what happens. That's the nature of the nonprofit sector. You know, because of obviously, you know, not having the a huge budget to work with, we cannot go and get in multiple individuals to run each aspect of our organization. Now, what this allows you to do is it allows us to actually work efficiently. So we can create specific teams, you know, so we don't necessarily have to say, okay, we've got, everybody now has access to the same information. So if we've got a team who are working on a specific fundraising campaign, for instance, we can set up Asana to have that specific project and certain individuals invited on there. What it then allows you to do is it obviously allows us to then create tasks and allocate tasks to that specific individuals with specific due dates and deadlines. Now, the great thing about it is that on a daily basis, each individual will get their own tailored email for tasks that they have that's sitting within Asana. Not necessarily for that specific project, but all the tasks that they've got due. So what we try and do as a firm is that all of our tasks, so your entire to-do list, you know, as much as, you know, I'm still old school, so as much as we've got, you know, the technology that we embrace, but I still have my diary. You know, it's still something that I still maintain. So yes, it might be a bit of duplication, but, you know, just sort of writing things down and striking off your list, I think it is something that is sort of ingrained, you know, in terms of your work culture through articles, which I still do. You know, but having an automated process such as this, it actually comes up on my email inbox every morning in terms of my tasks, and I never ever start my day without looking at my to-do list. Right? What it allows you to do is it then allows you to prioritize tasks. So you've got those tasks that have been allocated to you. You can then shift those tasks to what you're working on today, and obviously what's a priority, what you've got perhaps tomorrow, and then any tasks that are due later on based on due dates. Over and above that, you can actually create rules where the tasks will be moved between these categories, either due today or upcoming or tomorrow or later on, depending on the due date of those tasks. So it allows you to automate those workflows and obviously just manage yourself as well. Over and above that, it allows other team members to have a look at that specific project and then see, okay, which aspect of this project has been completed. Because what you do is once you've completed a specific task, you can then go in and mark that task as completed. And the rest of the team can see, okay, this task is now completed. And you can see exactly which tasks have been completed and which tasks are still pending as well, right? So, I think what it really has done is it allows us to collaborate effectively on various projects, and then over and above that, it allows individuals to now manage their own workflow, their own task list, as opposed to, certain individuals obviously need to be micromanaged. That's the reality of it. And some people are quite comfortable to work on their own. But this allows all of that. It caters for that entire work planner with daily reminders as well, right? So basically, that's what it is. Asana is a project management and collaboration platform, allowing us to work better in one shared space where our entire team can see what's happening with various projects itself, right? Obviously, allocating tasks with due deadlines as well, or with due dates and deadlines, and then automating that process in terms of helping you achieve your goals as an organization itself. Guys, I'm not sure if any of you have any other tools that you've worked on, perhaps, that you want to recommend. You're most welcome to do so in the chat as well. But I found that this is something that works well for us. And as I mentioned, we're obviously discussing the ones that we've worked with. Some of these tools are obviously utilized by some of the biggest companies or biggest international corporations as well. So that's the great thing about it, is that you're getting to access to tools that are available to some of the biggest companies globally. And again, as I'm going to mention, there are free packages also available for you guys as well. Right, moving on. I would hope that none of you are still using what's on screen currently. I know up until probably about a year or so back, SARS was still using fax machines. For those of you that obviously maybe young enough or fortunate enough to be, still have many years ahead, you probably wouldn't have even seen a device such as this. I know when I was in articles, we used to actually send out bank confirmations and debtor confirmations via fax. So you'd stand at the fax machine and you could hear it dialing, and you'd wait for that receipt to come through, which would give you the okay to say that the fax has been sent through successfully. But whether it went through to the right person on that side of the fax machine is another story altogether. Now nobody actually uses faxes. It's actually out of date. I mean, email has obviously taken over. But if you ask me, I would say that even with regard to emails, there's going to be a huge shift where even emails will actually become redundant in terms of the collaboration platforms that we actually use. And that moves us to obviously our next aspect, which again, dealing with project management and collaboration. I'm sure many of you have used Microsoft Teams on here, but it's a fantastic product if you haven't used it. We actually now internally, we actually use Microsoft Teams as being our primary platform of communication as a firm itself. And why do we do that? Because it's rolled up basically, obviously the old Skype, it's rolled up WhatsApp, instant messaging, emails, all into one platform. Everything can be done in one space together with, OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive, all of it obviously being now in one space. And if you think about it, right, in the old days, we used to have messengers on horseback, and then we moved to letters in the post, to faxes, and obviously now emails. When emails came in, it revolutionized the way we've worked. But now the next step is obviously collaboration as opposed to just email. And a platform such as this would eventually come in and change that. When we've had certain organizations who externally as well communicate with us via Microsoft Teams. So if we're working on a specific project with an organization, we'd set up a team for that organization. So except for our internal project team, we'd have certain personnel from the organization would obviously be part of that team and share information on there. So they can see the chat functionality, you can see the history, documents being shared with one another and stuff like that. It makes things so much easier as opposed to having to search through hordes of email in terms of finding information that might have been shared 2 weeks ago and it might have been sent to the wrong person, or the attachment get lost on the way and things like that, which can be a bit of a challenge. Whilst it does work, but it's not ideal, right? So yeah, in terms of obviously Microsoft Teams and how it works, for those of you that haven't been on the platform, like with Asana, you can obviously set up teams, depending on users. So you can have a management team, you can have a fundraising team, you can have your finance team on here, and obviously have specific individuals be part of that specific team. So they would only see information relevant to them. Over and above that, you can have a general team, or that's by default, and everybody within the organization forms part of that team. It obviously makes things a bit informal as well. And I think with the generation that we obviously now coming through, is that you can give the guys a thumbs up or put in your emoji and things like that. It obviously lightens things up, especially with people working remotely and things like that. It just makes things a lot more easier and obviously less formal as opposed to email. Right? Yes, there is a time and space for emails, but I think in a platform such as this, where you're collaborating with your team members, it just makes it so much easier, right? Now, what does it allow us to do, in terms of the full functionality of Teams? As I mentioned, you can chat, you can call each other, have your meetings on there, and you can collaborate easily. How do you actually do that? How do you collaborate easily, right? You can share documents, photos, videos, the entire chat history, all on one platform, right? So, for instance, if I have previously, if I were to review a schedule that would be, let's just say, a VAT schedule that I need to before it goes out to SARS, it would obviously be shared with me on email, and then I would share that with my client before we actually go ahead and upload that information. If there's any changes that has to be made, it obviously be a lot of back and forth between the individuals involved. Currently, we can do everything in real time on Teams. So you can share that Excel spreadsheet on here, and multiple individuals can be working on it at the same time, and I can chat to an individual specifically with regard to that specific document that I am reviewing on Microsoft Teams as well. So everybody has access to that final file that's saved on here. You don't have to save the changes. The changes are obviously saved automatically as you work in it in real time, right? And like you have documents saved on OneDrive or Windows Explorer, you'd obviously have folders where the documents are saved on here and can be accessed at any time by any individual. Another thing which is quite practical, sometimes you have someone who falls ill and they were working on a specific document, and now they're no longer at work, for instance. Previously the entire project would probably be held up until you get access to that information. Currently, where the best practice is to be working live on Microsoft Teams, if that person is not in, you can go in the very next day and continue where that person had left off and get access to the information that that person was working on, right? The other great thing as well is integration with third-party apps. So for instance, Teams does integrate with Asana. So let's just say you have the same team with Asana. On Teams, you'd be able to see those tasks and it will update on Teams as well. So you'd be able to see all the pending tasks with the completed tasks on here, and you can chat on this platform and share information. I know certain individuals or certain organizations prefer to share information on Asana, which you can do. You can share documents on there as well. With our firm, our process is that it's only the task itself and the task manager with the deadlines that are raised on Asana. All other communication and sharing of information happens within Microsoft Teams, right? Guys, before we move ahead, just want to see how we're doing for time. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left. We're almost at the end, but any questions at this stage with regard to project management and collaboration? Okay, the next aspect, I'm just going to play a couple of, or we'll play a video, we'll chat a bit more, and then we've got one more video to finish off. But we hope this is an initiative of Turning Point Chartered Accountants. The concept is $10 only. We have been piloting this so far with some of our clients. So we have gone ahead so far in terms of the future of fundraising. This is where we see fundraising and the entire Section 18A issuing of 18A certificates and receipting and the entire management of the Section 18A donor certificates, right? So I'm just going to play this video and then we'll take it forward from there. So guys, that's just a bit of a teaser on $10 only and the concept without giving too much away. But basically, in terms of introducing you to the concept and what's it about, the concept $10 only has come about. I know, growing up, my gran used to be putting little coins into those clear bottles over a period of time. It was a habit. And I think it's similar to your collection tins at supermarkets, for instance, as well. It's the power of the small amounts, but the masses contributing regularly small amounts towards a specific cause. And she would, maybe once a year open the jar up and you'd go out and feed or something of, just do some sort of welfare work with that. And likewise, I think with all these collection tins at the supermarkets, yes, it might be the 20 cents, the 50 cents and the R1 that go in there, but it still does a job. And what we've said is obviously the times have changed. And what we want to do now is that it's the power of the small amounts, the $10 that any individual can take out, whether it's once a month, but we want it to be habitual in terms of giving. But how do we do that? Currently, there's no platform where we can actually do that quite easily, right? Remember, we do everything online today. We bank online, we shop online, we order a ride online in terms of Uber and Taxify. We order our meals online as well, just with a few taps of our smartphone. The process is quite simple itself. However, when it comes to doing a good deed, it's a lot more difficult. I mean, how easy, if you come to think about it, how easy is it to actually go and find a non-profit organization to donate to? Yes, you might go online and you might find an organization who would have their banking details on there, for instance, and you perhaps know someone involved in that organization. So that's why you'd obviously support the cause. I mean, I can tell you with certain organizations that I support in the community that I grew up, the only reason why it's easy for me to actually support those causes is that because I know an individual involved in those organizations who I can WhatsApp and I can say, guys, please send me your banking details. And then I'm able to actually do an EFT into that account. Otherwise, it's a bit of a challenge, right? So what we're saying is that we want a platform where all nonprofit organizations across the country can showcase what they do. So think about it, similar to Takealot. Currently, Takealot, remember the products that are showcased on Takealot are not owned by Takealot. Takealot is merely the platform where suppliers are able to showcase what they offer, and it's ordered and the payment process and things like that goes through via Takealot, right? With $10 only, organizations would have the ability to showcase themselves to thousands of donors across the country. That's what it allows you to do. So you'd be able to list your organization on here. Depending on your activity, depending on your geographical location, you'd have specific tags linked to your organization, right? So to give you an example, for instance, if I want to donate to an organization that's involved in education down in Cape Town, if I go into the app, I can then go in and obviously search for organizations involved in education. So I choose the tag education, I choose Cape Town, and it will come up with all the organizations that are obviously then involved in education in that specific region, right? What I can then do is I can then drill down to see a lot more details about that organization. It'll give me links to their social media feed. It will give me a snapshot of some of their projects. As an organization, you are able to update that information at any time. You will have access to your own back end where you would be able to update that information at any time that you would want to. So if you're running a specific project or a campaign and you want to obviously get sort of more leverage on that, you can then go in and update that information at any point in time. You can then go in and manage the content on there in terms of the information about your organization, for instance, about the projects that you run as well, right? Now, what it obviously does is that it moves the power of charity into a donor's hands, into the palm of the hands in terms of the cell phone itself. Doing so, it obviously then gives the potential to actually increase your donor base and donations, because you're making it as easy as possible now for individuals to find you and make donations towards your organization, right? Remember, we've had what's called donor fatigue within a number of organizations, especially during this COVID period, where we found that certain donors were actually contributing over and over again on repeatedly to the same organizations. And eventually, because of obviously your donor base dwindling because of the economic situation that we found ourselves in, there was donor fatigue. The next time you approach that donor, they weren't as keen as supporting your cause as they might have been previously as well. So hopefully in this way, we can now reach a lot more individuals and we make donating habitual. So if you're giving $10 at a time, and if you've got someone who's contributing $10 a day, for instance, I mean, it costs less than a cup of coffee at a Starbucks, for instance. And if you can get someone giving 10 Rand only or $10 only a day, that actually counts for quite a bit if you've got a repeated donor every month who's contributing to your organization, who you can rely on. So that's the whole concept. So whilst $10 is obviously the name and the concept, it doesn't limit individual from only contributing $10. They can obviously donate as much as they want to, right? The advantage is that from the donor side, once they actually choose an organization, they can obviously then quite easily make a donation within a few taps of their cell phone. We've got our payment gateway being Ozo, which is quite a widely recognized and reputable instant EFT partner, for many online shopping platforms as well. So what they would do is once that, they no longer have to go in and manually input their organization's banking details, as it will be linked automatically, since your organization will have your merchant account linked to the $10 platform, and that donor can then easily make a donation directly to the organization. If for whatever reason, they're not quite keen on using a mobile app, remember, we've also got a web-based platform as well, so they can do it from their tablet or mobile phone. The functionality will be exactly the same as the mobile app itself, right? The last aspect, once the donor makes the donation, I'm not sure how many of you today have an automated 18A receipting functionality. The best we've seen is that certain organizations have tailored the invoicing function within their accounting software to actually turn that into an 18A receipt. However, 99.9% of nonprofit organizations manage that entire 18A process manually. What do I mean by that? You either have a Word document that serves as a template or an Excel template, and you have to manually go in and input that donor's organization, the date, the amount, and then send it off to the donor. And let's assume that donor comes in 1 year down the line when they're doing their provisional tax return. So for instance, I made a donation to your organization in March 2021, and now I'm doing my second provisional tax returns in February 2022, and I can't find my 18A receipt. I come back to the organization and I say, guys, I'm looking for my 18A receipt. I made a donation to you in March 2021. And it can become quite a problem for you to then access that information on your side, especially if it's been done manually. However, with $10 only, that 18A receipt is automatically initiated by the donor as soon as the donation is made to an 18A organization. They are able to then download that 18A receipt immediately. It's saved on the app and they can access it at any time. They can go back and search for a specific 18A receipt or all of the 18A receipts in a given period, for instance. Over and above that, you as an organization will have access to that information, because remember, you need to provide that information to SARS as well. So you would be able to, at year end, when you're doing your income tax returns and you need to provide the value of 18A certificates and the number of 18A certificates to SARS, you're able to easily go into your back end dashboard and access that information. So that's the concept of $10 only. As I mentioned, we've got, it's still in a sort of testing phase at this point in time, where we are testing it with some of our clients. We do have approval from Google Play. Apple hasn't been as kind. They don't want, they prefer us using Apple Pay, but that costs a lot. And for us, we do the plan has always been, or the vision rather, has always been that this app, should be launched without a percentage of the donation being taken off there. Every single rand donated should go to the donor. It works on a fixed fee sort of basis, in terms of you pay a fixed monthly fee and you've got access to it, and you have a certain number of 18A certificates that you can issue on a monthly basis. So it doesn't come in whereby a certain percentage of the donation is stripped off and then you getting obviously only a part of that donation. That's never been the intention, and the plan is always to have 100% of the donation going directly to the organization. So it doesn't go via any third party bank account as well, which is quite important for us. And with Apple, it's been a bit of a struggle to actually get to that point, but nevertheless, we hope that we are able to actually get over that in due course. So yeah, just the last video giving a bit more in terms of the app itself and the functionality.
Imagine a world where you could make donations with just a few taps on your smartphone. By seamlessly identifying your non-profit organization of choice based on your personal preferences, using a highly secure online environment with zero commission fees, ensuring 100% of your donations go directly to the organization. With Section 18A, receipts automatically generated for you and available at your convenience. And all with a few taps of your smartphone. Wouldn't the world be a better place? Now it can be. Launching soon.
So guys, I think that was the end of obviously today's session. We're doing well for time. We've completed at 11 a.m. But before we just open up the floor for any questions, just some of the solutions that we offer nonprofit organizations. As I mentioned earlier on, we obviously do specialize in the nonprofit sector. We do offer a fixed fee, total outsourced accounting, compliance, tax and payroll solution. It's fixed fee packages, so you pay a monthly fixed fee, and you're getting all of that handled for your organization. Obviously, we've got different packages, different tiers, depending on the size of operations as well. As I mentioned earlier on, we do obviously then, we do have an audit division. We offer both fund audits as well as statutory audits to nonprofit organizations, an area of specialization for us as well. A lot of, or quite a bit of specialized tax services, including VAT reviews for nonprofit organizations. And lastly, what I will send out is we've developed something called an NPO needs analysis. It's a free tool which you can actually access on our website, right? Literally, it will take you literally less than 5 minutes to actually complete. Believe me when I tell you that. But it actually gives you a nice health check of your organization in terms of registrations, in terms of compliance, tax benefits, and that sort of thing. It obviously fits into us empowering nonprofit organizations, because thereafter what it allows us to do is it actually allows us to then send you a dashboard, and we offer a free consult, which you can schedule to discuss specific issues relating to your organization. So I will send out that link via email as well. And yeah, if there's any questions, you're most welcome to unmute yourself, and the floor is yours. Guys, anybody with questions, please, you're most welcome to do so.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was just wondering, we have also moved towards cloud-based accounting through an outsourced firm. As I understand, that's the kind of service you would offer as well. But the way that it works at the moment is it's on Sage, and they hold the account. So we have all access that you've gone through with reports and so on, but they actually hold that account. And, maybe I'm old school, but, as you were describing all the saving we used to do, we used to back up and have 2 or 3 backups and so on. And now you're sort of relying on this, in the case of Xero, on their system backing up everything. So I was just wondering, do you, as a service provider, do you do extra backup of your clients on your account, or do you just trust that Xero account? And you're always like, what if something happens? And it's scary.
100%, yeah. In fact, it's actually a valid concern, and that's why it took us as a firm that long to actually jump over to the cloud itself. It was obviously, primarily that sort of concern in terms of your data and the availability of that data. Now you completely, obviously, reliant on an outsourced, or outsourced service provider rather. However, having said that, and having looked at obviously their security and obviously their track record and their downtime and that sort of thing as well, we were then quite comfortable to have full confidence in that product itself. So we don't do any additional backups at all in terms of the data on there. If you want to, if anything, what we normally would do is we'd sort of maybe download certain reports in Excel, maybe at, when you're doing your income tax return at year end, or maybe your monthly management accounts, or whatever the case might be, but at least you've got that. So you've got your full trail of your general ledger, all your transactions and things like that. I mean, that in terms of best practice, you should still do, but not necessarily in terms of backing up that actual file itself, but at least to have all of the data. If at worst case, something has to go wrong, you still have the details of all those transactions. But from what we've seen thus far over the years, and they've been around a long time, we've never had that issue happening. But as you said, you never know with technology. I mean, I think recently even Facebook and WhatsApp were down, so it's still very much a real threat. There's no watertight system.
And sorry, just one other quick follow-up question to that. Say if you are transitioning to your firm, for instance, and you've been doing this with another one, when you're doing that saving every month, do you then have to save the 5 years worth? So when you transition, it becomes seamless to the new service provider, if you know what I mean.
So if you can just repeat that. So if you're saving every month, I didn't get it.
Yeah, I'm just saying at some point, if you decide to change software or change, service providers, you have to have that 5 years of records. So how does that process work? Does it just move from one application to another, or do you then need to download all of those Excels, as you're saying?
Yeah, generally, if you're moving over to a cloud solution, then you would have, like Cloud Convert, a cloud conversion tool where that data gets converted automatically for you. Obviously, some of them do charge depending on how many years worth of data you want to be brought in and things like that. But there are tools available where you are able to actually convert that data as opposed to having to have the saved files uploaded, basically.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think there are a couple of questions in the chat. The limitation on the number of transactions at turnover for Xero accounting. Okay, so the question is there a limitation on the number of transactions or turnover for Xero accounting? Yes and no. Yes and no. Basically, with Xero, you have different packages that are available, right? You have a basic package which doesn't give you access to being able to raise bills and invoices that you need to issue out, or even expense invoices that you need to raise in. So for instance, it's purely a cash book package. So that's a sort of a basic package. Then you get a certain package which limits the number of invoices and bills that you can issue out for the year, or sorry, for the month rather. However, in terms of your bank processing of transactions, that's not limited. There's no limit in terms of how many bank transactions, but in terms of the bills that can be saved on the system itself, there are obviously certain limits on there. If you can send me an email, what I could do is I could send you a link to their different packages. The packages are currently dollar-based. As obviously Zero certified advisors, we've got access to certain additional packages that might not be available to you on the website. So that's why I say you can email me for that and we can pass on that information to you. They are going to be moving to a RAN-based pricing for the South African marketplace pretty soon as well. And no guarantees, but we are in discussions with Zero currently to try and increase the discount for non-profit organizations as well. So let's cross fingers and hope for that we are able to eventually do so and increase it as opposed to just relying on the standard 25% discount. Any other questions?
Hi, Reza. Can
Yes,
you hear me?
I can.
Hi, and it's from Iqraa Trust. Firstly,
Hi,
I'd
Reza.
like to say thank you so much for this interesting and informative session. It was really well done from your part, and you explained everything very clearly and thoroughly. And from Iqraa, we will surely implement some of your recommendations here, because you can generally see that we will be saving a lot of time and effort from currently our practices and moving over to some of.
Yeah, definitely, Dr. Vega.
I just have one question,
yes.
Well, two questions on the Zero, the app or the platform rather. And with regards to help, I know you mentioned that there is a help search bar on the top.
Yes.
If we need any assistance regarding something that an issue, for example. But I also want to know, is there like a consultant, like maybe a customer care line,
okay,
where we would have a one-on-one chat, which would make it easier for us to fix the issue at hand? Is there something like that?
Actually, that's an excellent question. I actually forgot to mention that. I should have mentioned that during the presentation. So over and above your help function, you do have a functionality where you can escalate any specific issues to an individual, so to a Zero consultant, and they would then respond to you online. It's not a telephonic support, however. It's obviously similar to how you have like a chat functionality. We've used that on a number of occasions, and again, excellent support that you get from that. And again, it's because it's part of the global platform, so that's why there's no sort of call center that you call into, where you're speaking to a specific individual, but you'll be able to see your entire history in terms of the query that might have been raised and any issue that you might have, and obviously the solution that they would then provide to you on there as well. So yes, that is available to you.
Okay, perfect. And if we want to maybe share our screen with them to show them the problem that is that we're facing at hand, would they be able to see it on their side?
Yeah, so you've got the option to actually even give them access where they have obviously read access or view access only to that specific organization. So for instance, if you want them to access that part of your organization, you can give them access, which allows them to obviously then troubleshoot. But so far, we haven't had any major issues. I think the issues that we had was more because you were sort of new to the system itself. And generally what they've done is, they then send you the link to the help article. That's how we found. So I think 99.9% of our cases were actually something where, because it was sort of new to us and we didn't find the solution that we were looking for, and eventually the person that responded, they'd give you the link to the actual help article, and once you follow those steps, you were able to resolve it. So it's very rare that you have to actually give them access to your organization, but that option is available if it's a major issue and they would need access to it.
Okay, perfect. And then lastly, I just want to find out with regards to the fixed asset feature of the system and the transitioning from our current system, we're actually using the Pastel fixed asset module. How then do we transfer all of our assets with balances to the new Zero system? Is it similar to how we would do our take on balances from our TD with regards to our accounting procedure?
Okay, so how that would work is they've got a template that you'd use with obviously the fields that need to obviously be populated. So if you can obviously download that into Excel and merely copy and paste and dump that information into their template, it makes it much easier as opposed to then having to manually bring in those fixed assets. So you just upload that files and it sucks that data into the fixed asset module. Pretty straightforward, even in terms of your depreciation rates and things like that. So you don't have to manually input it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Reza.
Only a pleasure. Okay, guys, so I think that's probably the end of it. I don't see any other questions. Our contact details are on screen for any of you, that need to pop me an email. Our contact number is on there. Obviously, this was the first of 5 sessions. The next one is accounting, compliance, and governance for nonprofit organizations, which will be presented by Farida Lavangi. That will be next week, Monday, before we then move over into the last 3 sessions, which are obviously more focused on tax. If you haven't booked for those, please do so. It will be quite valuable as well. And we've got a few different presenters coming up as well, so you're not going to get too bored with the same presenters presenting to you on each of the sessions. But yeah, thank you again on behalf of both Iqraa Trust and Turning Point Chartered Accountants. We really appreciate you taking the time off from your busy schedules to come in and obviously be part of this wonderful sessions and this initiative from Iqraa Trust. So we'd like to also thank Iqraa yet again. They've been a valuable partner to us over the years, and without them, obviously, these initiatives wouldn't be possible. So thank you very much, and we will see you guys next week. For those of you that haven't booked or are not on the following sessions, you're most welcome to send us an email, and do keep it in touch. We will also send through the NPO needs analysis on email. Take a few minutes, complete that, and we can hopefully then connect thereafter. Take care and be safe, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Reza. Indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Baker.
And also thanks to all attendants. And I look forward to getting any feedback from them, any suggestions. So we to see if this is something really valuable to them, so we can continue sponsoring this program. So thank you very much indeed, again.
It was more technical this problem. I just want to show you the comments that everybody was saying.